It was during the spring break of my second year at college when I got a phone call from my Uncle Richard, asking if I'd be willing to spend a few days over at his house. My grandfather had been sick for a long while, and at this point, there was no treatment left, just the effort to make him as comfortable as possible for the time he had left. I didn't envy anyone in this situation, certainly not Grandpa, trapped in a house that wasn't his own with only a son he barely spoke to anymore. And not Richard, whose girlfriend had died giving birth to their daughter 7 months ago and was now stuck taking care of a dying father. I'd like to say I was being selfless, offering to help out of pure love for my family. But the truth was, I was lonely. I had no friends at college. Ever since my mother passed away a year ago, I'd had no one to talk to. So when Richard called, I said yes, not because I was noble, but because I was desperate for connection. Not like there'd be much to do anyway, watch the baby, get Grandpa whatever he needed, and maybe catch up with Richard, though we hadn't spoken in years. Richard's house was far from everything, at least a 40-minute drive from the nearest town. The front yard was ordinary enough, a 2-story home that looked like any other, but the moment I stepped inside, I felt it, something was off. The house smelled like old books and something faintly musty, like time had settled into the walls, unwilling to let go. Heavy curtains blocked out most of the daylight, and the wooden floors creaked beneath every step. The place was old, far older than it looked from the outside. Richard greeted me warmly, offering me coffee, and I took my seat in the dimly lit living room. The furniture was mismatched, modern pieces clashing against the old-fashioned wallpaper and chandelier. It was like someone had tried to mask the house's true age with newer things. But the past still bled through the cracks. As we talked, I noticed a door, barely visible behind a bookshelf. Something about it unsettled me. The way the wood shimmered faintly in the dim light, it didn't look real. "Is that a closet?" I asked. Richard glanced over, his expression tightening. Just a little space in the structure. Nothing important. He shrugged it off, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Before I could press further, the dog outside started barking. I hadn't noticed it before, a filthy golden retriever wandering the yard. "Didn't know you had a dog." Richard sighed. "I don't. It's just some stray that keeps showing up." Odd. The dog had a collar. That night, I struggled to sleep. The barking outside didn't stop. It was almost rhythmic, like the dog wasn't barking at something, but for something. The next day, Richard left for work, and I spent my time taking care of his daughter, Chloe. I also tried opening that strange door behind the bookshelf. Locked. Figures. That evening, Richard came home with Grandpa, and when I saw him, I felt my stomach drop. He was barely a person anymore, skin clinging to his bones. His eyes sunken and distant. Stage 3 skin cancer had ravaged him. He could barely speak, only muttering fragmented words about pain, about his skin, his flesh. That night, I heard voices from Grandpa's room. "No, I've told you already, it's not happening," Richard whispered. "You know you have to." Grandpa murmured, his voice hoarse but alarmingly lucid. The conversation ended abruptly. I wanted to ask Richard about it the next day, but he looked exhausted, defeated. When I finally did, he sighed. "This house, it used to belong to him. You know, Dad's just not happy with how I'm running things here." A lie, I could tell, but I let it go. The tension in the house only grew. Grandpa spent his days mumbling in his room, pointing at things I couldn't understand. And then, another late-night argument. "It has to be me," Grandpa insisted. "You don't deserve it," Richard shot back. "You treated us like garbage. It doesn't matter if I deserve it. It has to be me. And it has to be tomorrow." I didn't sleep after that. The next day, Grandpa's door was locked. Richard stayed home, looking worse than ever. That evening, he finally told me the truth. "You never knew about Phoebe," he said, "our little sister." I blinked. "What?" "She went missing when she was 5. Just gone." His voice cracked. "They never found her." Dad started drinking more after that. I didn't know what to say. It was as if my entire family history had a missing piece I'd never known about. That night, I woke up again, but this time, it wasn't Grandpa's voice or the dog's barking. It was footsteps, slow, heavy, descending the stairs. I crept to my door, heart pounding. Grandpa's room was open, empty. I followed the sound to the kitchen, and the door behind the bookshelf was open. Inside was a staircase leading downward. I didn't hesitate. I had to know. At the bottom, I pressed my ear against the cellar door. Something was breathing on the other side. Something pulsed. I turned the handle, my hand burning against the heat of it. The truth was waiting for me. Richard stood alone in the cellar, clutching a knife. The wall in front of him, it wasn't a wall. It was flesh. A massive, pulsating mass of organic tissue, glistening under the dim light. It moved. It breathed. "Where's Grandpa?" I gasped. Richard didn't look at me. He was right. He murmured. "It had to be done." "No," I whispered. "No. Where is he?" Richard turned, a manic gleam in his eyes. "It's what he wanted." The fleshy mass flexed outward, groaning. It was hungry. Again. Then, from upstairs, Chloe started crying. Richard's eyes snapped upward. He ran. "Don't," I begged, chasing after him. "Richard, don't." We fought. I tried to stop him, but he was stronger. He slashed my leg, sending me crashing to the floor. As I gasped in pain, he grabbed my arms and began dragging me toward the wall. "No," I sobbed. "No, please." Tendrils emerged, wrapping around me, piercing my skin, pulling me into the wall. I felt myself fusing, my consciousness slipping away. Then, a flash of yellow, a voice. "I've got you." I was pulled free, collapsing into the arms of men in hazmat suits. I barely registered the words. The questions. They never found Richard. Now, years later, I sit alone in my apartment, staring at the grey sky. I think of my wife's smile, my daughter's laughter, but it's not real. The wall showed me beautiful things. I want to go back,